Ever wonder why your bass sounds huge at home, but it disappears into the mix when you're playing live? This may not be in your fingers, your bass, or the pickups, but it may be in the cabinet that you've chosen. In this video, I'm going to go head to head with 1x15s, 2x10s, 8x10s, 2x12s, and I'll break down which cab sim in the Helix works best with your style, rig, and mix. And at the end, I'll show you how to dial it all in with Line 6 Helix. Hey, I'm Twisty, and in this video we're going to go through the unsung hero of our bass rig, the bass cab. It's not the sexy part of the rig, and usually when people are looking for tone, they're going to the amp or the pickups on their bass. But the cabinet may be the most important part of your bass rig, as it's the one that, when it comes to how your tone gets out of your amp and into the ears of the audience. So whether you're playing reggae, punk, rock, or disco, by the end of this video, you should have a great idea on which cabinet configuration you should choose for your style and rig setup. Let's take a look. So here's the thing, you spend hours dialing in the cabinet, putting effects in everywhere, dialing in the EQ settings to get that perfect sound, and you've got a solid bass guitar to work from, but something still feels off in the tone that's coming out. And why? Because the cabinet's the one that puts the character into your tone, and it affects your tone more than you think. Each of the common cab configurations, 1x15, 2x15, 4x10, 8x10, 2x12, and even the rare 6x10 cabinets have their own personality, frequency response, and feel to give you that bass tone that you're looking for. And when you're working with the Helix or the HX Stomp and any other amp modeler on the market, and even IRs to that aspect, you're simulating that entire experience of adding a cab to your tone stack. So let's have a look at each cabinet type, its tone, its feel, and its best fit for a particular genre. So first up, we've got the 1x15 inch, the deep thumper. The tone of these is warm, round, and a full-bodied low end. The low mids push through the mix, but the high ends roll off nicely. They're best used when you want a fat tone that supports the mix without too much grind or grit in your tone. If you pair these with a set of flat wounds on a P bass, then you'll get that Jameson type sound. They were originally released with the Ampeg B15s, and I know Billy Sheehan uses or prefers the 1x15 cabinets in his current stage rigs. If you really want that doom machine for sort of doom metal, stoner rock, dub type music, then the 2x15 inch cabinet is where you're going to want to spend your money. The tone of these is massive low end with added volume. You've got two 15s pushing lots of air. Compared to the 1x15, there's less mid clarity, and you need to make sure that you're pairing those 1x15s together nicely, or buying it as a 2x15 cabinet. These can get muddy really fast, so you'll need to watch your EQ settings, especially around the mid-range. For an all-rounder cabinet, and my personal favorite for live gigs, is the 4x10 inch cabinet. The tone of these is punchy, there's a tight low end with a very defined mids. And a lot of these on the market, like my MarkBass ones, have a tweeter that also gives you some of that high end to be able to dial in some grit. The 4x10s give an excellent articulation of tone across the mix, especially in the mid-range, giving a really nice thump in the chest. These are really good if you want a fast response and note definition with some balance around your tone. Great for rock, great for funk, great for punk, and some modern pop type musics. Again, I would say this is the all-rounder, and if you're looking for a cabinet and you've never had a bass rig of that size before, moving from a practice amp, for example, then a 4x10 would be probably where I would recommend you would start and see how that goes. Next up on our list is the massive fridge, the 8x10 inch cabinet. They stand about 4 foot tall and they weigh a ton. Really hard to get upstairs, but they have a tight, aggressive tone with tons of presence. And they sit perfectly within a rock and metal type mix. These would be best for punk, hardcore, hard rock and progressive rock type sounds. But you can also get the nice blues type sound out of these depending on how you set your amp. If you want your bass to punch through any mix with a tight bottom end and in a loud band, then an 8x10 is absolutely going to be your friend. Unless you're carrying it to the gig, then it's not your friend. But if you've got a friend who can carry it for you, bargain. If you like that 8x10 sound, but you can't quite fit it in your car, then there's also a rare model of a 6x10 inch cabinet. It's like the 4x10 with tight punch, but it gives a little bit more push and volume because you've got an extra 2 10-inch speakers that'll push more air for you. So it's a bit of a mix between the 8x10 and the 4x10. 4x10 with volume, 8x10 with less sound, less weight. Again, great for rock, punk. If you want that stage volume you just can't quite get out of your 4x10. Alternatively, like myself, rather than going with a 6x10, you could use 2 4x10s, which gives you more modularity, but the same type of volume that you get out of that 8x10 with the punch of the 4x10. Our final cabinet configuration is becoming more and more popular. It's the 2x12 inch cabinet. Now guitarists tend to use 1x12s, 2x12s, and 4x12s. Bassists tend to use 15s and 10s, but the 2x12 cabinet is becoming more and more popular for bass players because it's a smaller cabinet than the 8x10, and it's smoother than the 10s, but tighter than the 15s. So it gives a great sort of combination of having a 10 of the 4x10s and the 1x15 as a single unit, and gives that blend across the spectrum. Often used in indie, alternate rock, and modern fusions type styles. They're great if you want that hi-fi bass tone with full range. The 2x12 can sound a little bit mid-scooped, smiley face scooped. So again, adjust with your EQ settings on your cabinet, or adding an EQ later to play around with those mids to get the sound that you're looking for. So let's have a look at the HX Edit. I'm using my Line 6 Helix LT, but this would be a similar solution for HX Stomp, HX Stomp XL, etc. I've got a basic, very basic amp configuration setup. I've got a compressor on. It's a standard out-of-the-box compressor for the Rochester. I've made no changes to it. That's just to give some tightness on my playing and a bit of punch. I'm running an SVT in the normal channel and it's fairly flat. If you've watched my other video on the SVT for Motown sounds, that's pretty well the sound I'm using. And I'm going to start with the 1x15, and in the Helix that is an Ampeg B15 that pairs with the Ampeg B15 amp. To keep these all consistent, I'm going to use a 421 dynamic microphone, which is a fairly common microphone in recording studios used with bass guitars. I'm going to run everything on the cap edge, or the edge of the center of the speaker. That gives me a bit of the cone sound of the air movement, plus the tightness and brightness of the core. I'm going to run a low cut filter. I always put about 45 Hertz as a low cut to keep away from the kick drum. Now you can vary that, but between 30 and 60 is where the kick drum's going to come in. So I like to meet in about 45 to 50. And I'm going to roll off at 5 kilohertz because there's not much above 5 kilohertz in the bass guitars range that's going to be of value to me. So I'm going to keep all those settings the same. I'm using my Yamaha BB434. It's got passive pickups on it. I've got the tone rolled off slightly, and I'm using about 60% of the back pickup and about the same on the front pickup. So if I have a look at that 1x15, nice, deep, clean, low bottom end. If I swap that out to the 2x15, I'm going to go with the Fender 2x15. So this is the 2x15. I should get a much deeper sound out. Often quite subtle, but it is there, a bit lower end. Now if we move up to the 4x10s, there's two 4x10 cabinets within the Helix. One's the David Eden 4x10, which is the Garden, and the other one is the Ampeg Pro 4x10. The main difference between these two is that the Garden has a horn or a tweeter in it, so it's going to give a little bit of a higher mid-range top end. So let's look at the Garden one first. So same microphone setups, and so this is the Garden. So to me, that sounds, as the 4x10, that sounds like it's got more body to it than the 15s. So if I move on to the Ampeg 4x10, there is no tweeter in that. So should be a lot more a lower tone to it. I'll tell you how that one goes. For the style of music that I would like to listen to and for the tone that's in my head, amongst the other noise that's in there, I actually quite like that Ampeg 4x10. It's got a little bit more warmth to it, to my ears. The Garden's great, and I used to have that 4x10 as a real cabinet, and I loved it. Bloody heavy, but I loved it. But it's got a little bit more a higher mid-range tweak to it, and that's because the horn or the tweeter that's in there. Now as we move on to the 6x10, again this should be a similar tone to the 4x10s, but with a little bit more volume attached to it. So to me, it's a bit of a mix between those two 4x10s actually. A bit brighter than the Ampeg, but not as bright as the Garden. Now let's look at the big beast, the 8x10. Let's see how this 8x10 goes. Within the Helix, I think this is my favorite cabinet to use with that rock sound. Nice tightness in tone, and very flexible. Now, I'll often pair that with something a bit brighter, but we can go into that in a different video around bi-amping, etc. The only other one that's in here worth mentioning would be the 1x12 Epicenter. I know this is not the 2x12 that we talked about, but as a 1x12, this is the Epiphany cabinet, and the Epiphany gear is really designed to be really clean and more hi-fi than the other gear. Let's have a listen to how that goes. Really clear, really brings out the natural tone of the bass. It's got that broad, again, the broad sound of the 4x10 punch and the 15 bottom end it meets in the middle. So if you're looking for a nice clean, really articulate the bass itself and the strings on the bass, then the Epicenter one will be awesome for you. Let me know in the comments below which one of these either you preferred or the ones that you're actually using. And again, are you changing the mics around? If I'm looking to actually start gearing this up to a specific tone, then once I've got the roughed out the cabinet configuration I've got, 4x10, 1x15, etc., then you start playing around with the microphone, and then you start playing around with the position of the microphone. So it all becomes incremental. But by understanding how the components work and what the different sounds are like, then you're going to get a better understanding of how to dial in your tone yourself, rather than just downloading an IR from the internet where someone's done some work and recorded a predefined sound. You can now start to match it. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't download IRs. There's lots of good reasons for it. And in my video above, I talk about the difference between IRs and the Helix cabs. But in my opinion, if you understand, or once you understand how to dial in these cabinets and the tones that each configuration of the cab is giving you, then in the real world, then if you're rocking up to a gig, you don't have your Helix and you've got to play and there's a type of cabinet on the stage, then you know how to get the best sound out of that. So which cab did you choose? Well, the advantage of having a Helix or a Quad Cortex or the like is that you don't have to choose and carry it with you. It can all be done in the box. But which one you choose and which one you put into your signal chain is going to depend on the style of music you're playing, the mix that you're working on, and the tone goals that you're trying to achieve out of your bass sound. If you want a tight punch, a 4x10 or an 8x10 is going to give you that tightness and drive through the chest. That's how I explain it. If you want a round vintage style thump, then the 1x15 or the massive 2x15 is going to be what you're looking for. Of course, artists like Billy Sheehan, who are using the 1x15 and still getting that tight punch in the chest, means that you can still use them. But again, as a out-of-the-box approach to starting with which cab you're picking, the 10 inches are going to give you that tighter tone, and the 15s are going to give you a bit more thump at the bottom end. But one of the advantages of using a modeling device like the Helix or the Quad Cortex is that you can stack your cabinets. You're not limited to the one. So you could put two 1x15s and get that 215 cabinet. You can put a 4x10 with a 1x15. You can put two 8x10s together. And you can switch microphones around to get different tones.